So this video, you guys are doing really well at writing programs, but it looks like right now you're struggling to get organized while writing for your response classes, which is understandable. It's a very hard thing to do. So you do need to start practicing that more now that you're starting to get an idea of how to program. So we're going to go through a free response question, not a very complicated one, but they're all sort of the same. They have the same basic elements, and you need to just keep those in your mind and go through them every time you're generating a class. Again, remember, simple. Keep things small. You shouldn't be writing a lot. So the question is to write a point class that represents an x and y coordinate, and then to do a few things with it. Now, on the free response question, you're going to get some information, and some things will be already started for you. That's not going to be, we'll start this one from absolute scratch. So, obviously you're supposed to make a class called point. I'm not writing this by hand. You are. You would be doing this by hand. I'll do it on the computer, but just follow along. So, if you're writing a class, unless you're writing a tester, there is no main. So you're going to write a couple basic things. Every class is going to need some kind of instant variables, constructors, and then methods. These should include accessor and mutator types. Okay. So instance variables, this can change. Give yourself some room when you're writing these things, because you might come back and be like, oh, I didn't need that, or ooh, I need to store this data. Instance variables is where you need to store persistent data. So a point needs what? What does it think about? What does a point need to have? Well, it has an x and a y. So, and all instance variables are always private. So, and we're not going to make it too complicated. We're just going to do integers. So private int and x, and then private int y. Okay. We'll give ourselves some space if we need to come back and write more instance variables. We will. But for now, that seems pretty straightforward. Remember, they're always private. We have not initialized them yet. That is what the constructor does. Always initialization of variables. So constructor, public. All methods are, and the constructor is public. Constructor, name of the class. Now, this is the default constructor, no parameters. I might want to have parameters, in which case you would be told in your program, in the assignment, what you need to do. In this case, we can assume that we're probably going to need an x and a y anytime we make a point. So we're not going to have a default with no parameters, because we're always going to have a parameter. Now, this is legal, but you don't want to make your parameters the same as your variables. So let's call it, I don't know, x1 and y1. Now, inside your constructor, what you're always going to do, initialize instance variables. So you need to handle every single instance variable up here in some way or another. Okay? You can't just leave it up to the computer. So x equals x1, y equals y1. Remember, your initialization, it's always going to be the instance field on the left equals either some parameter or some value that you come up with, but it's always the same format. Class, instance variables, constructor with the class name, instance variable on the left, assign it on the right. Now we might need another constructor. We don't know yet. This seems to handle what we need. Now, what methods should a point class have? Well, we should probably be able to change the point and get information about the point. So let's write a method to allow us to set a point. So public, this is a mutator. Let's write it under our method, just to keep everything nice and organized. So public, don't know if it has a return type yet, but we'll just do this. Set point int x1, int y1, x equals x1, y equals y1. This just allows us to go in and edit a point after we've created it. And once the constructor is called, it's going to call the constructor once, and it never goes back and runs that again. So this would allow us to change things. Okay. Probably should be able to get information about this point. So public int get x, no parameters. Return the x value. Okay. Public int get y. Return the y instance field. Okay. That seems like a pretty good set of methods for a class to have. That is representing a point. Now, in the rest of the problem, it says to write two methods. One, get distance from origin. Now, on the AP exam, you'll probably, again, you're going to start getting things that look like this, where you already have part of it. But if you can, you do need to know how to write it from scratch. So, in this example, you were actually given all this, and it says you have to write the following method. So this one returns the distance. This point is from the point 0, 0, that is to say, the origin. And then at return, the distance at this point is from the origin. Now, it might look a little weird to write sort of the repetitive code here, but I'll show you in a second why that is useful. And then you're given public double get distance from origin, no parameters, and then on the example it'll say something like code goes here, and then the assignment says to write the method get distance from origin that will return the distance between the point, this point that we're working with right in here, and the origin. Use the following header, which you're given, and you would write your answer below it. Alright, now the hint says to remember that the distance AB between 2 points, A, x1, y1, and B, x2, y2 is calculated as the distance is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So all we have to do is double distance equals 0.0. We're going to do this longhand just so we can pretend that we're actually writing this on the fly and thinking, alright, I'm going to need to calculate the distance, let's create a variable and set it. Always create everything and set them before you use them, just to be safe. So double distance, you're not going to do the equation. Well, distance equals, it's the square root, and that's math, that square root of 2 points. Okay, well, in this case, we're always going this point and the origin. Well, the origin is 0, 0. So it's the square root of my current x value minus 0 squared times x minus 0. Now that we should put to its own block. Okay, so that squares that plus y minus 0 times y minus 0. Do we need the zeros? No. But it's allowing us to think through the distance equation. Okay. Now, this tells me I have to return something. I've created a variable of the proper return type. I'm going to return the distance. Alright, now I have a method that does this. Now, the rest of the assignment says that a client program uses this method, this class. So that would be a tester or an executable. So it's going to be a main. So it's going to create an object of this point. And you're supposed to write a method, find public static point, find far point, which given 3 points returns the furthest distance one. Now this would not go into this class. This would be separate. So we're just going to review what we do with our class. We were given a name. We decided it needed instance variables, a constructor, and methods. That's the order that you're always going to write your classes. And then we went and figured out, well, we should be able to get information about all of our instance fields. We should be able to potentially change data of our fields. And then we had to write the required method, but it's really, you could just return that function. And so this is one line. So remember, you're not going to be necessarily writing a lot. So there's that one. Now the answer for the tester class, you're not going to write the whole method. Neither are we. We're just going to write the method that they told us to. So inside of here it would be public static void main string args. Remember, that's just always going to happen if you're writing a tester. Alright, now blah blah blah, do stuff. We don't really know what's going to happen in here. But we know that we've got to make this, they gave us the header, public static point find var point, and my parameters are points. So point p1, point p2, point p3. Interesting, we've never done this before. Alright, public, spelled wrong. And I have to write this. Now, the reason this is static is because it's going to be used in main, outside of main in my main class. Access modifier is public. Right now all of our methods should be. And the return type is a point. So that means I know I'm going to have to create a point, and I'm going to have to return a point. Okay? So, let's make some points, and then we're going to return it. So I'm going to make a point variable. I'm not sure what to make it equal to yet, so we're not going to do that quite yet. But first we're going to pretend to get these 3 points, they have to have been created. So somewhere you would say something like point p1 equals a new point, call the constructor 4, 5. You make as many of these as you want. Except remember, they're objects of the point class. They each have to have a unique name. Can they have the same data? Could, although that renders our test kind of irrelevant because neither of them would be the furthest away. Now then, well, point p4 should be. Now the way you would call this is the farthest point equals, we need to do this calculation. Now we have a method that's going to do this calculation. Equals find var point, and I'm going to give it p1, p2, and p4 as my 3 parameters, because find var point will accept 3 points and return to you which one is the furthest away. So to do that, I need to get the distance each of those is from the origin, and then that's the furthest one away. Now, how do I do that? Well, you already wrote a method in the point class that calculates how to find out how far I am from the origin, right here. Get distance from origin. So all I need to do is call that method in my other class and have it do the work for me. Now the beauty of the AP exam is even if you left this blank or it wasn't going to actually work, you can pretend that it works in here. So all you have to do is know how to properly use it. So double distance 1 equals point 1, call the method. It's a public method that all points know how to do. Get distance from origin. No parameters. That will tell me, based on my point p1 parameter, how far away from the origin am I. Now, we just need to figure out how far all 3 of them are. So, but not on point 1. Point 2, now this is where it's getting a little tricky. This is point 3. Now point 3 is technically a parameter based off of point 4 that I made, but that was my 3rd parameter. So inside of this method, I have a local variable, a parameter called p3. So I need to call it appropriately. It's going to get me the data from point p4, but this method has no idea of knowing that that's supposed to be point 4. It just knows that as given, it was labeled as point 3. Now, I need to figure out which one's the furthest away. So let's just say that the longest one, the one of the furthest distance, equals, well, which one's the longest? Well, we haven't decided yet. So we just arbitrarily are going to make the first one the longest, and then we're going to compare it. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. Point, far point, equals P1, because P1 goes with distance 1. So currently I'm going to say my longest distance is distance 1, therefore my furthest point away is P1. Now I'm not making a new point at this juncture. I don't want to make a new one, I just want to make a copy of which one I say is the furthest away. Now I'm going to do some stuff, and eventually I'm going to return that point. Now if I stopped right here, I'd return P1. And again, the thing about the AP exam is you get points based on doing the correct thing. This is a method that needs to return a point. If you just create a new point, assign it to one of your points, and return that as your answer. Let's say this was a 2 or a 3 point problem. That's probably one of the points right there. Now, does this method ever calculate the furthest point? No. But you recognize that you knew what you needed to do. You needed to create a point. You need to set it equal to one of your points and return that data. So if you just did that, you might get 1/3 of the points. Remember, 1/3 of the points is 3 on the AP exam usually. But we don't want to do that. We want all the points. So now we need to figure out how to determine which one of these is actually the furthest away, point 1, point 2, or point 3. We arbitrarily picked point 1 and said we'll start there. So now I just need to check the data. So if distance 2 is longer, then that one needs to be my far point. If distance 3 is longer, that needs to be my far point. So if distance 2 is greater than my current longest, reset longest equals D2. Now, if the longest is D2, then my far point needs to change as well. And that needs to become P2. If D3 is greater than my longest, then my longest now should equal D3, and far point should equal P3. Now the reason I don't want this to be an else if statement is because if D2 is longer than D1 and D3 is longer than D2, it will not continue. Because as soon as it finds a true statement, it executes it and kicks out of the sequence. So if I wrote it like this, it would never find D3 being the longest, because as soon as this was true, it would run, skip all other conditions, and go to the end. I don't want to do that. I need to check if D2 is the longest. I also need to separately check if D3 is longer than my longest one, and if so, reset. Writing it this way will catch everything. Now, let's check. I take 3 point parameters. I calculate their distance from the origin using the getDistanceFromOrigin method written in the point class. I figure out which has the longest distance, and I say that's my furthest point. I then check if my second distance is longer. If it is, I reset my longest variable, then resetting my far point to match the appropriate point. Check one more time. At the very end, I return far point. And that is it. So, go over how to make a class. Instance variables, constructor, more than one if you need it, methods. Always do it in that order. And then remember, even if you didn't write it, if you left this blank, but you know how to use it, know that you're going to be required to use methods that you wrote. Again, you can assume that they work correctly.